So Nicholas is asking, do people suffer after a deathbed conversion?
Nicholas, this is a really interesting question. It's something I've never really thought about. So I do appreciate this because this is a new aspect. I think, when we're talking about people who die on their, they're on their deathbed and they give their heart to God before they die. And, would they suffer? Like in a spiritual sense, I would say absolutely not. If they die, they're not going to suffer for their sins. Like there's no purgatory or anything like that that they would suffer in. However, if you're asking if their physical body suffers after they've given their heart to Christ between their conversion and when they actually die, those moments or hours, however long it is, that's a good question. I couldn't say yes or no, but I would say, the best basically deathbed conversion story in the Bible is that of the thief on the cross that you read about in Luke chapter 23. And so it doesn't say that whether or not he, physically had a ton of pain before he died, but I'm sure he did suffer to some extent. Again, like I said, in Luke 23, um, in verses 39 through 43 is where we'll just kind of look at the story. It says, then one of the criminals, so basically Jesus was dying on the cross, and on his left side, there was a criminal, on his right side, another criminal. So Jesus died among, thieves basically. And one of the criminals on his side said, if you're the Christ, save yourself and us, almost mocking him, like saying like, oh, if you're really who you say you are, people say you are, like, why don't you, do this for me? And verse 40 says, but the other answering rebuked him, saying, do you not even fear God, seeing you are under the same condemnation? And we indeed justly for receive the due reward of our deeds. So he's saying, like, we deserve to be here. He says, but this man, Jesus, did nothing wrong. And then he says to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, assuredly, I say to you today, you will be with me in paradise. So Jesus gave him confirmation today is the day of salvation for you. You can know today that you are saved. And so it's just a beautiful story that, yes, this man knew that day that he would be saved. Now, we do know that, later on, basically that, they were going to break the legs of all the people on the cross because they need these people to die before the Sabbath. I mean, sorry, I shouldn't laugh. That's not funny. It's just, it's sad. And so, the thief on the cross was, probably one of them. They probably broke his leg so he couldn't push himself anymore to breathe, and that's how he died. It was probably a physically painful death. However, could God have done a miracle for him? And I do believe it's very possible. And I have heard of people, and I've had a family member that appeared to have a deathbed conversion experience as well. And I could see that although, they were very, very ill, they were dying of cancer, they appeared to have a peace that they didn't have before. And I can only explain that through, John 5, 14, 15, when we pray for miracles to happen, for people to relieve suffering, for God to intervene, it always has to be prayed in accordance to God's will. And I know you might think like, well, God, why would you will for anybody to suffer? And I can't, fully understand why, other than we live in a sinful world. And, there are terrible things that do happen, but God can intervene if he knows what's best. And, like it says in 1 John 5, 14, 15, and 14 and 15, that, we have this confidence that, if we have in him, if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know he hears it, that whatsoever we ask, we know we have the petitions we've asked of him. So it's very possible that he could have had relief of suffering, even, miraculously, even though, like this thief who died on the cross and gave his heart to Christ before he died. And, if nothing else, I do believe if you have given your heart to Christ on your deathbed, you will have a peace that you would never have experienced before. And Isaiah 26:3 promises us that God will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. And so if you've given your heart to Christ, on your deathbed, then if nothing else, you would die peacefully, knowing you're saved, knowing you are going into eternity, in God's merciful hands, and that your salvation is sure. So Could there be some physical suffering after your conversion on the deathbed? It's very possible. However, the mental anguish would be relieved because you would know for a fact that you are saved that very day. And that's a peace and a blessing that no one can take away from you. And it's really invaluable as well.